everyone. Welcome to the panel this afternoon. And I'd like to just first introduce myself. So I am Denise McEvoy. I am a UX and design lecturer here at IADT. I have a passion for user experience design and emotional interaction design. So I'd like to kind of hand over the floor to each of the panelists and ask them to kind of introduce themselves. And just before we start, if anyone would like to ask a question throughout the panel session, you can post it into the questions column that should appear on your screen, and we'll kind of go back and forward to those questions throughout the session. So maybe if we could start with Peter, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Peter.
Hi, my name is Pete Simcoe. I run a company called Simcoe Media. I started literally 20 years ago last month, so it's the 20th anniversary. I focus on video, graphic design work and photography in that order, in that most of my work currently is video. Clients include Airbus, where I go into there's a factory near here, one of the plants where they build the wings. I go and interview people like head of plant, that kind of thing. There's a Toyota motor manufacturing plant as well nearby. They get me to do photography, video. So those sort of clients, that sort of work. Yeah, that's the summary.
Right, thanks. So Rory, would you like to share?
Sure. Hi, my name is Rory Madden. I'm a co-founder of UXDX, which is a conference and training company. And what our mission is to break down the silos between product, UX, design, and dev. And what I mean by that is if you go into a lot of organizations, there'll be a product department or a research department or a design department or a dev department. And while they're supposed to all be very much in sync and kind of working together, it's very much somebody does some work, throws it over the wall, next person does some work, throws it over the wall. And that's how a lot of companies still operate today. We're trying to help them move into kind of much more product team type structures where everybody's actually working together, because it's more effective, it's more efficient, but it's a difficult transition for companies to make. So that's what our conferences and training courses do, is help people make that transition.
That's brilliant.
That's me.
Great, thanks so much. And Aisling?
Hi everyone, so my name's Aisling and I work at a digital agency called All Human. I've been working there for the past 3 years. We just recently rebranded to All Human. We were previously Strata 3. So I'm there as a senior. I came in just after graduating in 2018, and I work with many clients, government services as well. And I've been working in both UX and UI, so I get a broad range of both. So being from the discovery phase to the final product, which is really exciting as well.
Right, and Lauren?
Hey, yeah, so I'm Lauren Day. I work for a company called Workday as a UX designer. I've only been here about 6 months, and before that I used to work in a couple of agencies, including a UX agency called Each Another. At Workday, we create kind of HR software for very large enterprise companies. So we deal with software that helps you manage, say, 10,000 employees and all the kind of intricacies of that. But I specifically work in the area of implementation and data. So a lot of the work I do is dealing with really complex situations and trying to make them user-friendly, which actually is a really interesting space to be in. So we'll see how it goes as I onboard and continue working there.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for everyone for the introductions. And I suppose we're here to talk about careers, and I'll take you back a little bit now because I'd like you to kind of share maybe your experience or your journey kind of into the industry after you left college. So sometimes it's not as straightforward. You know, you may kind of go traveling for a year, or you may do research or go on to postgrad or go straight into industry. And I think that there's always a little bit of anxiety when college finishes what to do next. So I think it'd be great for you to kind of share your experiences and the routes that you've taken to, I suppose, to kind of support the students so that they know that there's many different ways that you can go into the industry. Maybe Peter, we'll start with you just because we'll go with the order from earlier.
Sure, yeah. So, in answering your question, where did I go from finishing university? I went to Loughborough University, which was actually Loughborough University of Technology at the time. That's in the Midlands in the UK. When I graduated, I'd really enjoyed the course. I graduated, I think I came second in the group, and I'd really pushed and focused on product design. It was product design and technology, so you had an understanding, a basic understanding of mechanics, electronics, so you could talk to engineers and you could talk to artists. And the idea was that you were not concentrating too much on the technicalities, but you had an appreciation. What I found was when I left was that I lost a bit of interest in product design because I felt like I designed everything I wanted to design. It sounds a bit obnoxious, but I got more interested because obviously in the early 90s, things like Photoshop and Illustrator and the Adobe software was developing. I suddenly became more interested in video and design in a 2D sense. And I built up a lot of skills in terms of rendering and drawing and designing during the years at Loughborough. So I had that skill set, but it was really interesting because I kind of came to those disciplines with a 3D product design mindset, which is slightly different to a graphic designer's mindset, which brought both advantages and disadvantages in the way that I was thinking. They had more knowledge on certain things like print and all the theory they've been studying, but at the same time, in terms of you still have to deal with objects even in a 2D sense when you're designing. So in terms of advert design, there was always a sense of depth to what I was doing that I was never convinced that I would have had that sense if I had just done a graphic design course. Now, as I say, there's pros and cons to taking that approach, and I certainly had a big learning curve and felt a little bit behind in some other areas where designers, just simply because there's similarities. If I was, so to get to the point to help people watching this, if I was leaving university now, or if someone was saying to me, what should I do? I would say that in the first few years, you want to make the mistakes that you're going to make so that you can learn from them before it gets too serious and there's mortgages and there's serious legal problems involved and all those kind of things. In terms of if you want to go and dabble in product design, you want to go and dabble in graphic design, and that's what you think you should do, go and find out what you really want to do from university, college, whatever, straight away, and you've still got some leeway. I would say within the first 10 years. I don't know what other people think of this, but I think within the first 6, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, you've got some leeway to move around a little bit. I think when you get into your 30s and 40s, you're kind of down a path that you can't easily cross over into another area. So I think what I'm coming to the conclusion, I presume, you want me to conclude now, is that in the early days, work out what you really want. And if you think you want to make a move slightly veering off what you've been trained to do, then that's the time to do it.
And that's really interesting because I think, students put an expectation almost on themselves that they must go straight in. And it's really about that is the time to experiment and really enjoy what you've learned in college and how you can actually implement that. Would anyone else like to come in there? Maybe Lauren?
Yeah, so I had a similar kind of non-direct route into UX. I actually graduated from a competing art college in Dublin with a fine art degree in painting in 2010, so that shows my age. And I wanted to be an artist for a while, but I failed miserably at that, mostly because I realized I wasn't solving a problem for anyone. So I kind of wasn't sure. I felt, the recession was in full swing. I ended up working in retail for a while, but then in the retail company I worked in, I got to the opportunity to kind of work in e-commerce and marketing. And through kind of e-commerce and marketing, I started doing things like Google banners and website banners and designing web pages and thinking about graphics. And I always had the love of graphics. Similar to Peter, I loved the Adobe software. I was kind of training myself in it all the way through college and just as a personal interest. So I actually went back and did a second degree in graphic design part-time. And I think that ties to what Peter was saying, is you can be brave in those years. So I was about 27 when I did a second degree. And it's committing to taking that risk. So I ended up working full time, doing a degree part time, but it was the best thing I ever did. So I discovered design, and design gave all my kind of creative flair context. And then through graphic design, I always loved the digital. I designed an app as my final year project, and after getting a job in an agency, a graphic design agency, I was doing a lot of product design and web design. So then I went and did the master's in IADT in UX, because I just it was the most sensible conclusion to all the diversion I had done up to that time. But I mean, I didn't do my master's and I didn't actually arrive at UX until a couple of years ago, when I was kind of in my early 30s. So it's okay in those first 10 years to understand, like, to not be 100% sure. But also, on reflection, everything I did up to that point has really contributed to my skill base. So all of the retail and customer service stuff has made me super, I have a great ability to talk to clients and talk to people and try and kind of investigate problems. My painting degree has made me very conceptual and think out of the box. E-commerce has obviously helped with the design and the understanding of commercial worlds and stuff. So it's all actually been of value. So I think that would be my big takeaway. Like, it's okay not to be 100% sure, and embrace every opportunity that you have, and paths will open up if you're, if you keep an eye out for them, and you're open to them.
Yeah, and I think that's really true, because I mean, even with our fourth year students at the moment, they're doing their major project, and it's really about trying to diversify and look outside of the medium, that you're in, so that you can kind of enrich your practice. So if you're, after you graduate, if you're going into different industries, taking on board what you learn from those is only going to further, bring a richness to your work. And I suppose, Rory, you deal with a lot of people from loads of different backgrounds. What was that kind of a similar thing for you in your career progression?
Yeah, so I was just trying to think what my career progression was, and when I was filling in the CAO, like going way back, I picked engineering because I didn't have to specialize for 2 years. So I was shoving the decision down the road. And then when I specialized, I did computer and electronic engineering. So that made me like shove the decision further down the road of which area will I specialize after college. And then when I finished college, I joined a consultancy. So I joined Accenture for a few years, because that, again, it was kind of broad. And I know I'm probably not coming across as the best thing, but when I was leaving college, I was kind of, do I do a postgrad? Do I go into industry? I don't know what I really want to do. Consulting just seemed like a good idea because it still left things open. So that was kind of how I ended up with consulting. And then when I joined, it's suddenly then, okay, now I've got this kind of, Accenture was a giant company and they had very structured kind of levels and things within the company. So that just kind of became my structure. I was like, okay, I need to do 2 years here, and then I get to this level, and then I do another 2 years and I get to that level, and it's kind of climbing the corporate ladder. And I guess as I went through my career, I just got talking to a friend, and he said he interviewed at a place, and he just asked, okay, how long till I'm like at the top? And they worked out it was like 20 odd years. And he was like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. And that kind of opened my eyes to, well, actually there's the shortcuts that you can do, and there's the other avenues. So that's when I kind of left the consulting world, joined kind of startups, tried a few startups, failed. But what it did do was, during that journey, that's what got me into UX. So I was much more on the dev side of things, kind of coding and that kind of thing. But in the startup world, it doesn't matter what product you build, people need it. People have to need it, have to want it, because you can build the best thing. If nobody really cares about it, it's not the best thing at all. So that's where I kind of shifted from being very focused on the tech to being much more focused on the user needs and kind of the product UX side of things. After the startups didn't go as well as I had hoped, I went back into the corporate world and just realized that everybody was making the same mistakes that I had been making. And that's where UXDX came from. So we set it up back in 2016. And I've been running conferences and training, kind of trying to teach enterprises more so, because a lot of startups have that by the nature of their size, they're very collaborative, but then enterprises put in a lot of structure and stuff. So that's just a background on my career. So I guess in summary, a lot of indecisiveness at the start, and just kept leaving options open. But I think that was good, because I would echo a lot of what other people have said is, try things, kind of For me, I believe that there's some people who go very much the specialist route, and there's others who go more of a generalist route. I'm leaning more, as my career has progressed, I've gone from the specialist to more of the generalist, because when you start trying to kind of get up higher in companies and kind of run things, you need to know a bit of everything. So that's just kind of my trajectory has gone from being that career ladder, very specialist focused, to being more, I need to see the end-to-end picture of things.
And that's really interesting. And I think as well, like a common thread that's coming through is the learning experience and this kind of lifelong learning and always kind of engaging with new ways forward to kind of keep progressing yourself. And Aisling, you're studying at the moment and working as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so long story. So I graduated from the Institute of Technology Blanchardstown in 2018. I done my undergraduate in creative digital media. So we got to do a range of everything: photography, video, animation, and visual communications as well. Because I came out of school wanting to do everything. I wanted to be an artist, designer, anything I could get my hands on. So I was like, this is a good opportunity for me to explore. But I started to get into the design side a little bit more, and I enjoyed the photography and video more as my artist background that I have. So I have similar background to Lauren. And we done universal design, which was all about having emotional design and empathy towards users. And I got very invested in that, because I feel when you're working on your portfolio to get a job after coming out of college, people might fixate too much on the final product and you won't concentrate on showing us how you got to that final product. So I think the process is very important. Don't be afraid to show your rough work, show the pain points, and also a reflection on things of how you got there, things that you do different. I think we concentrate as students too much on trying to show, you know, the kind of the sparkles and glitter. So I think that's something, if I was to go back as well. But I have then got into the industry in 2019, so it was a couple of months of applying for jobs. Because after I left Blanchardstown, I done an art piece instead of a UX product, and I got to bring that to Electric Picnic, which was quite exciting. So that took up my summer, and then it was like, okay, I need to start applying now for jobs. So I got time to work on my portfolio, and then in February I got the position at All Human. So I went in and just showed my process and the designs that I worked on and things I would like to work on and what I'm looking for. If I was to work with All Human Strategy at the time. So then I got the position as a junior designer. And I said to myself as well, I'm going to wait until I get into the industry for a year or two and then look at going back to college, which is why I'm in IADT now, doing my postgraduate in UX design. And I'm looking into do the masters now next year. So I think it has been a long process. I am 3 years now in the industry, so I still have loads to like learn and grow from, which is exciting. But I do know not better now that I do want to work more with accessibility, and I've always had a lot of empathy for people and for users. So that's what I want to hone in more in my work. So that would be an area of focus for me.
And I think as well that, you know, you touched on something there around, you know, around the portfolio and how you kind of, you know, reach out to employers and put yourself out there. Is there anything that, you know, the panel would like to add with that, you know, so around how do you kind of get those first kind of steps out into industry? You know, it's very intimidating, and we all suffer from kind of imposter syndrome at times. And how do you kind of take those first steps, you know, about putting yourself and your work out there? Is there anything that the students should be kind of thinking about or focusing on? I know there's no magic wand, but maybe there's something, or, you know, if you're receiving kind of like CVs or applications in, or even from your own applications, is there things that, you know, possibly you've included that's helped you get that next step or get that interview call back?
Are you asking
the
everyone in
format,
general, or?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe Rory, if you want to go in there.
Yeah, I've just got some kind of thoughts on experiences I've seen. So I kind of think of like applying to a job as, a lot of people just think, okay, I have a CV or I have a kind of portfolio. But what you actually need to do, and this is, and I can understand when you're at the point where you don't even really know which companies you want to go to, but it really will help if you do a little bit of research on even just the scale of the company, the types of people that work there, because I would put together a very different CV if I was going for a role in a small company, in an agency, in a large enterprise. I would put together very different details, because if I'm in a large enterprise, I'm going to be one small kind of cog in a very large machine. So what they're going to look for is, can I do particular tasks? They're going to be hiring for a very specific kind of a role. So maybe you're a UX researcher. So what they'll want to see is, okay, what's your methodologies? What's the process, I guess, as Aisling said, more so than the, because everybody makes the mistake of, here's my end product and doesn't it look great? But what companies really care about is, how did you get there? Because I don't care what you did on that one. I want to know what you're going to do on my products. So that would be, I'd focus very much on the process of how I was doing things if I was going for a large enterprise one. But if I was going for a very small company, they're not so focused on the process, because what's going to happen is you're going to be given a lot more latitude in what you're going to be expected to do. And so they're not looking for somebody who can just do some really good research. They're going to be looking for somebody who can kind of do research, maybe a bit of design, throw in a bit of kind of marketing maybe, or something like that. So they're looking for much more generalists. And what, if I was interviewing for that role, I want to see people who are taking the next step, which is talking about the outcomes. So it's not even the process. It's the, okay, so if this is the process that you did, but what did that achieve? And why was that relevant? And so what were the outcomes you achieved? And if you were in a different situation, so maybe just give some different context of, okay, in this situation, because it was this, I went this approach. But in another situation, I went this approach. And what that's showing the employer is that you have sufficient knowledge to know when to use something and when to not. And I know that's very difficult if you're just coming straight out of college, because maybe you don't quite have that yet, that kind of experience of knowing when to use something or other. And that's where I would say just reach out for mentorship. But sorry, I've kind of, my key point is, you don't have a single CV, you don't have a single portfolio. You do need to be thinking, and I just do kind of company size as a bit of a proxy, but maybe it's not the full correct one. But I would be looking to kind of tailor it a little bit to the message that the person who's hiring wants to hear.
No, that's great. I think that's actually really insightful and some really, really good points there. I don't know, Lauren, have you anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, so I would definitely mirror what Rory is saying in terms of be aware of who you're applying to. They definitely look for different things. And there is a vast difference, having worked in both enterprise versus agency. So as Rory said, agencies are more looking for, they love your ability to communicate and your ability to tell stories and to kind of be advocates of your work. Whereas in enterprise, that's still all really important, but the justification for doing the work is usually done by someone else, and you just have to do it the best way you can, or you know, so like visualize those problems, for example. And the only other thing I would add is consider the format. At the moment, there's a big trend in submitting website portfolios, but in reality, when you go to interview and you show a website, there's no natural stopping point when you're scrolling down a big long page, and it can be a little bit overwhelming when you're looking at everything that's on your page to try and talk through it. But it also provides kind of not that much guidance for someone who's just stopping in, like, what project should I look at first? What's the most important? What are the key parts of this portfolio? So actually, what I found work is to have a website where you have your basic product, your basic kind of projects that shows enough to get someone interested. But when you go to interview, have a deck that you can talk through, that's step by step, that you can stop at a certain point. that you can have presenter notes on that they can't see, and you'll actually feel much more in control of the conversation you're having once you get to interview. And it's a little bit more work, but it also means you can go more into detail in those decks as well. And especially if you're working in companies that have NDAs, so things that you're not supposed to disclose publicly, you can put those in your deck because no one else is going to see them, and you know, you can mention it in the interview and stuff. So I found that helps as well, which is not something someone told me the first time I interviewed, and it was a bit chaotic talking through the website.
And I think as well, it gives you something else to talk about. It adds kind of a richness and a depth when you're talking about your work. And that kind of leads me on. We have a question in from Frank, who would like to know what a typical UX interview may be like. You know, Aisling, since you've gone through one, you know, quite recently, what was your interview like?
Yeah, so my interview was with my design manager and one of the senior UI designers. And I went in and they asked me to show my website. So similar to what Lauren was saying, I had everything on the website. So I was clicking through, but I knew what links that I wanted to go to and what conversations I wanted to have. So I was able to show I had case studies. So I kept it to 3 case studies, and I was able to show the process from the journey maps, wireframes, and then to the final product. If that's suited for the project, some projects didn't have UI designs because that wasn't necessary to the task at hand, but I was able to show that process. They're asking me what I want if I was to work at All Human as well. So what skills would I like to improve on? Because I did apply, it was a junior designer position at the time, so I was able to communicate what I would like and what the outcomes I'd like to see. So I was able to like say I would like mentorship on certain areas, especially in the UX side, because our last module in our 4th year was UX design, and I felt I still needed to kind of grow in that area, as opposed to the UI side. I had quite a lot of skills. One thing I'd say as well, actually, now that I think about it, is programs. At the time we were learning Sketch. In college we were actually doing Illustrator, which it's not that long ago, which is not industry standard at all. But to just make sure to maybe upskill in Figma is something that's starting to become industry standard now, and there's loads of tutorials online. For wireframes, you don't really need to know skills in Figma, depending on the area you're looking to go in, but there are always things to be knowledgeable on.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really good. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Peter.
I have, from a completely different angle. In that I'm kind of learning how to go to an interview now quite a lot, because we're talking about kind of generally applying for full-time jobs and that kind of approach. I end up having a very different approach as a freelance designer, in that I'm always trying to identify an opportunity within a company that makes sense, and this is the key thing, that makes sense to the customer or the client or the potential client, but also makes sense to me. So I need to be able to offer it and deliver. So I need to be quite aware of everyone needs to be aware of their skills, but I really need to be aware of my skills if it's a new client, and try and understand what they might want. So for example, I've spent so much, I can give you a great example of some success stories which involved a ton of hard work and rejection. If you don't like rejection on a constant basis, you probably shouldn't be freelance. But I went around this huge number of companies in a kind of industrial zone, all the small to medium companies, and they all either were like, why do we want your skills? Because I was either offering, you know, do you want some brochures or photography? And so I try and identify in each company what they might want as something that really works well for me, but really works well for them, and I could deliver efficiently and make a reasonable profit from it, and they wouldn't be offended by the price. That's constantly what I'm looking at. So you really got to be looking from that business point of view. So I spent 2-3 days going around this huge industrial place, and then as a last resort, I'm like, okay, well, I'll go and talk to Toyota, but they've all got their own internal people, blah, 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 blah. They were the only ones that said, yeah, come in. For some reason, it was like, I somehow managed to get a conversation with the managing director, who said, okay, we'll get you to do some photos. I was like, I just can't believe all the effort I've gone to the small to medium companies. And so what I'm saying is it takes a huge amount of time and energy to identify within each of these companies something that you could do that might be useful to them from a design point of view, and occasionally get some really good luck, and then you get then you don't get luck for ages, and then you get really good luck again, and it just happens every so often. And it happened twice within 6 months with two really big. I never thought I'd have household names on my books. It was always SMEs before small to medium enterprises. So that my point being there is that I don't have the same application process or the same. I literally don't have the conversations the rest of the guys on this panel have, in that my approach is, well, the other thing as well, I could go through some agencies that would provide me with work. And when I say agency, I mean it in terms of they would pass me the work. But the other important thing for myself as a freelancer is I want to be able to choose, because I need to look them in the eye and see if they're actually going to pay me. And this is where making mistakes earlier on in my career, in terms of trusting people that you shouldn't trust and looking for the signs that, will you get paid? Will it work out? How's this going to work? Is this person being honest with you? All those little things that, as a designer, it's a slightly different sort of, it's a social skill, but it's a work social skill as well. So I need to go and interview them as much as they're trying to assess me. It's like, do I actually want to work for these people? Because I could.
I think.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to get a different insight. You know, that because some students will go to freelance after they graduate and not necessarily go straight into companies, and you know, they may travel as well. And I think that that's a really good core skill, being in kind of UX and design. It's something that you can, you know, it's universal. You can work all over the world that way. And I suppose even with, you know, the pandemic and the last 2 years, it's afforded us the opportunity as well to work for companies in different locations that we don't physically have to be there anymore. And I suppose that would kind of lead me on to my train of thought. I was wondering around kind of your different experiences of going through the pandemic, or what effect that's had on your work, on your day-to-day lives. I know you know, a lot of our students we're back on campus now, which is wonderful, but we've had kind of a time where they've been working remotely the whole time, and it's probably, they feel it might have kind of affected maybe their opportunities of networking or their peer learning. But I'd like to know kind of your experiences of what the pandemic has brought to you. And Rory, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I'll start back at the start of the pandemic. So I run a business that relies on running large-scale gatherings indoors. So the pandemic has not been very kind to my business. But what it has done, so I guess when it came, we had to cancel all of our conferences, and we tried to pivot online. I guess the people here know full well the different experience of sitting watching something on Zoom versus actually being in a place. So there were some people that definitely, we were still offering the same value of kind of content, but you couldn't charge the same amount. You couldn't kind of do that. So the business really struggled financially. For the first year in particular, we found other revenue streams to kind of keep us going after that. But that was kind of from the business side of things. From the personal side of things, I guess my daughter was born in April 2020, my first child. So from a parenting point of view, it's been fantastic, because I'm the opposite to kind of my student days, where I just wanted to be out in the pub kind of 7 days a week. As a new parent, you just want to be in bed all the time, trying to get as much sleep as you can, and no commute and all of that, and spending time with my daughter. So from that perspective, it's actually been amazing, because I've been able to spend all that extra time that I wouldn't have gotten to spend with her had I been commuting and working away from home. And I know that that's not good, because I just picture if I were in college, I would have hated the pandemic, because it was all, in college for me, it was all about partying and socializing and kind of going to different clubs and societies and things like that. But I guess kind of fast forward to now, what's happened is we pivoted our company to being 100% remote. And what that's enabled us to do is we've hired people from Romania, from Cyprus, from different places around the world. So we're no longer tied to a physical location, and talent is everywhere. So that's one of the things, like I would suggest, like, maybe apply for jobs in the States. They are paying phenomenal money over there. You might have to work some weird hours, but I would try it if you just wanted to earn some quick money. But what it's enabled us as well is I escaped winter. So I don't like the cold. So we just decided I'll move to Mauritius for 5 months to escape winter, because I have an internet connection. I can work, I'm working with the team, all the people around the world. So there's kind of a couple of pros and cons there of, like, from a business perspective, hasn't been very good. From a personal perspective, quite good. And then kind of trying to figure out this remote working. Definitely some issues with motivation and trying to make sure you stay focused while doing it, but it has enabled and given me a lot more time back in commuting.
Yeah, I think it definitely offers a level of flexibility. Lauren, you were working remotely. Are you back in the office now?
Yeah, so I'm in the office today, which is nice. Remote working is a funny thing, isn't it? And the pandemic has been a funny thing. I think in terms of design, there is no escaping the need to network, right? Every single job I've ever gotten, any of them, the good ones anyway, has been through knowing someone. So kind of key people that you've worked with, lecturers from your college, or just friends, right? So it is super important. And I know it's like a very different world now that a lot of stuff is remote, and it can be a little bit harder, but there's lots of I found there's lots of ways around that. There's like any opportunity you have to get involved in something. So I'm a mentor in the Big Idea at the moment, which is Kim Mackenzie Doyle from the IDI has set it up, and it's like mentoring transition year students, but I get to meet a lot of people through that. I still go to a lot of events, and there's often little breakout rooms and you can talk to people, but it's also it's almost a full-time job staying in touch with your design contacts. So but I do think as a graduate, be advocates for each other. So stay in contact with your friends from college, and they will bring you along and you can bring them along, and it's a mutual effort. But it's like they might get a job somewhere, they might hear of something else going, they'll mention it to you, or vice versa. In the case of freelance, I did freelance for a little while, and it can be a situation where you have work on and you can't take on work, but you always try and refer that work to someone. Or it might be that you don't have the kind of the skills to make sure that you can do it the best that you could do it, but you might know someone who's amazing. Refer, be advocates for each other, and opportunities will arise, and that's irrelevant to whether you do that in person or not. So I have found that that's really important over the pandemic, but it is tough to work from home when you need to network. I love not having to commute, but I love being in the office, especially in UX. It's such a collaborative space. It is really nice to come in a couple of days a week and work with your team, especially because we're new, to get to know each other, to have a drink after work, to talk about stuff. So I'm looking forward to that hybrid balance approach. So we've got quite a good one. It's 50-50. So I can choose the days. I could even not come in for a month and come in for a month and stuff. So it's very flexible. But yeah, that would be my main takeaway from the pandemic. Like, don't lose touch with the people that are your advocates, and be advocates for each other as well.
And I think finding the balance is really important. I think that's really key. I guess I'm just a bit cautious of time, and we have some questions coming in that I'd like to kind of put to the panel. And Clara wants to know, does the panel think that you need a master's? So
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, I would just say that a master's increases your wage, but it's not a necessity.
I'd say wait years is what I was gonna say. Like, don't be quick to just after finishing your undergraduate straight into masters. Maybe just kind of try to learn a little bit more in the industry, and then go back and do your masters and have a better idea of what you'd like to do for your thesis. So that'd be my advice.
Yeah.
Or even what master's you want to do, because you may straight away think, oh, I'm going to go into a master's that's very similar to my undergrad, but actually when you get out and have those life experiences, it will change, or your direction may change as well, and your interests may change. So I think there's benefits to both.
So just a point from kind of the hiring perspective, after about 3 years out of college, I don't really care about what course people did. I'm more interested then in their experience and what they've done. So Like, yes, it's very important in those first 3 to 4 years to get that first 1 or 2 roles. But after that, it really is all about experience.
I think what I would add, sorry.
No, go ahead, Peter. Yeah.
I was going to say I think Aisling's comments about taking some time out are really important, because one thing I tell you really realise is you realise the cost of everything when you go back into a university, that even just having a little space to work out or your own desk in the real world, that's going to be, you know, potentially you could do hot desking in central London for about £150 a day, and you just get a little desk. That's all you get, and you're in a room with about 50 other people who are shouting down the phone, and that costs you £150. So going back into university after a couple of years to specialize also makes you realize what you want to specialize in, which is what you said before, isn't it, really? And so you're more likely to make the most out of it. And on the other hand, if you're going for an academic career, then you go straight to a master's potentially, because actually you know that you want to do master's, PhD, blah blah blah, and it's just stepping stones from there. Do you think that's fair enough from your perspective, Denise? Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, no, I definitely do, and I think that sometimes as well, when someone finishes a degree, they don't feel ready to go out. So sometimes a master's can give you that extra level of confidence as well, or more kind of like detailed knowledge on a particular area, or maybe you've only kind of touched on an area of UX, say, as part of your course, and you'd like to explore it more. So sometimes a master's can offer that. I would also say sometimes it's easier when you're in the mode of being a student, that it's easier to go into postgraduate education where you've been out for a number of years and then you go back. It can take a little while to kind of get your mindset back into kind of doing, you know, extra work on top of your work as well. So I guess there's pros and cons, and it's very different for everyone else. But Peter, I wanted to come back to you because we have another question which directly relates to what you were saying earlier, is around what are the signs that you're going to get paid? And can you share these?
Oh, okay. Okay. The things that you realise are generally the general rules that the signs that I look for are people start talking turkey. They start talking about and they take you seriously when you start talking about money, and they kind of say, okay, well, yeah, that's fine. It may be that you say, well, look, to start with, we'll do payment up front if you're super confident that everything's going to go very smoothly. But you've got to be careful of that, because it can sound like a bit of an insult that you don't trust people or something. But generally, they're not afraid to talk money, and they are quite happy to spend a bit of time making sure that you're happy and making sure that they're happy. If a brief gets vague, that's when you're putting yourself at risk. If you've absolutely nailed the brief down, not to within millimeters, but with more centimeters, where it's quite clear what you're going to do for them, and it's quite clear what they're paying for. And if they spend quality time discussing that, then it's highly likely. And you kind of get a feel for the person as much as you would get a feel for them socially, which is why I do think that person, it could be person to person, it could be online. But when you meet someone in person, I do think it's slightly harder when you've had a personal sort of business meeting with them. It's slightly harder for that person to turn around and behave entirely differently. So it's just a gut instinct that you gradually develop. And I think whether I said it earlier or whatever, it's those early days when, I mean, my hourly rate is now significantly higher than it was 20 years ago. Well, you'd hope so. 20 years ago when I started. And so it did happen a couple of times where people had no intention of paying me, and they didn't. And they were small little jobs that I learned. Okay, that's the sign. That's the body language. That's the vibe you get when you're not going to get paid, and that's the vibe you get when you are.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much. I suppose I know we're just out of time. If we could quickly, if I could just ask you, kind of to sum up what kind of keeps your passion or your interest still in UX. If there's anything that anyone wants to share just before we finish up.
For me, it's like always be learning. Like, so I'm always doing courses, always learning from people, always asking questions. The day you're stagnant, the day your work becomes stagnant, and you'll lose interest. So it doesn't have to be formal. It can be formal, but just, yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lauren. Rory, I think you were going to say something there.
Very similar. It's I still think it's incredibly nascent industry. There's so much more that we can figure out in terms of how to be more effective, how to work better, different techniques, different practices. So I just love kind of learning those kind of things and exploring and trying to figure it out. So while there's still more to learn, I'm going to stay excited. And I'm pretty sure there's always more to learn. So.
And Aisling, you'd agree?
Yeah, it's strong support network as well. It's what you need, like a strong team. So whether it's, you know, your classmates that you're graduating with this year or going through the next few years together or within work, it's always important to have that strong network, and that keeps that passion and drive when you're working strongly together.
And finally, Peter?
I was just going to say, again, it's a slightly different angle, but what keeps my passion going is I'm always branching out into little areas that I find interesting. For example, I really pushed 3D and 360 video for a while and managed to eventually got some work in from that, which is great. Actually got paid to do what I was just enjoying doing, but I had to do a lot of proof of concept and ideas before I got that. At the moment, I'm dabbling in Adobe Character Animator, and had a quiet February, had a good January, quiet February, but during that quiet February, I did something that I was really interested in doing, made a music video with some characters, but it also involved a lot of Photoshop work and a lot of skills development, and it's that passion for doing something that you're not necessarily getting paid for, but it's a good portfolio item. That's what's really important, is that, you know, do stuff you enjoy that you really can present as a portfolio item in your downtime. And I don't think you go far wrong, because it keeps your interest in it, and it means you increase the chance of somebody coming to you and wanting to pay you for what you've just enjoyed doing.
That's brilliant. Everyone, thanks so much. It's been really insightful. Thanks for giving your time and sharing your experience as well. I'm sure everyone listening in got a lot from it. So thank you so much for today.
No problem.